Hello, Wonderland. Today we are at Dutch Gap Conservation Area to play with my fairly new Canon R7 and give you some thoughts about it as we go. Let's do it. Kelly here. So like I said, we're back at Dutch Gap Conservation Area, which really is my favorite place in the Richmond area for wildlife and birding especially. There's a nice variety of habitats here, so you tend to see a variety of stuff. I've already seen some ospreys, bald eagle, egrets, sparrows, woodpeckers. So yeah, brought my R7 to try to zoom in on some of those guys and shoot them in the face, as my YouTube buddy Brent Hall says. I shouldn't call him a YouTube buddy. We hardly know each other. But anyway, I like that. So yeah, I've had the R7 for about a month now. So as we go, as I get some shots today, hopefully, kind of give you a little rundown of, not a review per se. I don't really do reviews, but certainly got some thoughts on the camera after using it for a while, and I know it will be a big camera this holiday season, I'm sure, so thought it might be useful if I give some thoughts on it. So let's continue. We will walk around some good trails here, obviously, and see what we see. It's cold today. I think it was about 25, 27 when I woke up. It's probably getting close to 40 by now, but I'm a Florida boy. This is still chilly. But good thing is, got the place to myself as usual. So this is kind of the ugly part of the trail. We're walking alongside what were the fly ash fields for the nearby Dominion Energy power plant. And I believe they've converted mostly to natural gas, so they're working to clean up the coal ash fields. So this is just kind of a ugly part of the trail, but thought it'd be ironic, right? Use the ugly part of the trail to talk about the most important part of any camera, which is the image quality. So R7, superb, of course. I mean, really, you can't buy a camera these days that doesn't have great image quality. Various nitpicks here and there. Some people say Canons do color a little better than the other brands. I don't know. Looks good to me. So yeah, I got originally the R6, as you might know, but I found, since I'd moved up to a 4K monitor, the 20 megapixels of the R6 really wasn't quite enough, I didn't find. So I went to the R5 instead. 45 megapixels is great, but frankly too much for most purposes. So to me, the R7 sits in a sweet spot at 32 megapixels. It's great, gives you plenty of leeway for cropping, plenty of detail, doesn't out-resolve lenses too badly for the most part. So yeah, been happy with that. ISO performance, no issues. I push it usually 1600, 2000, cleans up very nicely. I've been using DxO Pure Raw 2 for noise reduction when I need it, and that makes it look beautiful. I'll go higher ISO, like nighttime situations when I was shooting at King's Dominion Halloween Haunt, that kind of thing. I might push it to 3200, 6400 even, but that obviously starts to get noisy on any camera, so usually I'll stay 2000 or below, and that's plenty. For capturing like birds and wildlife in action, cranking it up to 1600 or so to get a good shutter speed, it's no problem. So yeah, no issues with the image quality. So, and like I said, any camera you get is going to have good image quality these days. I feel like Canon and Nikon both fell a bit behind in the mirrorless race when Sony really pioneered that. But Canon has certainly caught up. Nikon, I believe, too, with their latest round. The Z9 is pricey but excellent. The Z6 II, Z7 II, here, those are really good too. Most of the folks I follow on YouTube are either Canon or Sony. But I'm sure Nikon will close that gap as well. But yeah, image quality on the R7, thumbs up. At this spot in the trail, I almost always seem to see a great blue heron. And indeed, down this drainage canal, I don't know how well you can see him here, but right between those, in the fork of that tree, he's sitting there. Kind of backlit. Might make for a neat shot. I'm gonna do it. I recently got another new toy too, the 24-105 f4L. I'm not going to talk about that too much, but I'm here to try it out as well, so I'll do a video about that later. But basically, I have the 24-70 2.8, but it's big and it's heavy, and I thought this one might be better both for the wider zoom range. It's a little smaller and lighter. Yeah, and f4 is good for a lot of the landscape and stuff I do, so yeah, good on that. But anyway, you might ask why I got an R7 when I already have an R5. I'm hearing a woodpecker. Nice. Anyway, good question. So my first Canon DSLR was a 350D Rebel XT. The birds are coming to check me out. And that was a crop sensor, obviously, and I moved up through a few different models to the 7D Mark II, was my last one, and that was a crop sensor too. So my first full frame camera was the R6, and I found that I kind of missed the crop sensor, especially for wildlife and macro. That extra, the 1.6x crop factor really helps with that stuff. So when Canon came out with the R7 and R10, I was intrigued, and eventually I decided to pull the trigger on the R7. So yeah, wildlife is the main reason. Yeah, so still walking around, still shooting, keep going. Okay, back to the R7, and we're looking at the back of the R7. I wanted to talk about controls and ergonomics, which is another pretty important part of a camera decision. So I think the big thing on the R7 is this new scroll wheel with the joystick in the middle. I've heard both ways. Some people like it, some people don't. I think you get used to just about anything. I like it. I do have to kind of readjust my brain when I'm switching between the R5 and the R7, of course, but it works well. You've got your four-way here. Not as many buttons on here as the R5 for configuration purposes. I like to custom map a lot of buttons. Screen obviously works very well. It would extend all the way out, but I keep an L bracket on the camera usually for protection. So, and I actually usually keep the screen folded in like this just for protection, and because I use the viewfinder for pretty much everything. But when I do want to switch, I've got my set button mapped to switch between the two, and I like that. I do something similar on the R5 just because I don't like how this sensor will switch back and forth between the screen and the viewfinder if you've got the screen available. So yeah, there's that. I like that the power switch is up here on the right, easily reach with the thumb. I like that it switches off to camera mode to video mode. So you basically have different menus in the video mode, which is pretty cool. More customizability there. The mode dial up top, of course, pretty standard. On the R5, you've got the little screen and the whole different mode button. I do like that the R5 has a dedicated thumb wheel for ISO. This one, you've got to push the ISO button and then adjust it, but not too big a deal. Multifunction button, I use that a lot. This has the new digital hot shoe. I don't have any compatible flash or anything. I haven't really used on-camera flash for quite some time. Used to when I shot families and portraits and stuff, but I don't do much of that these days. And otherwise, pretty standard Canon layout. Yeah, can't complain about anything. Fits well in the hand. I like it. Has a pretty deep hand grip here. I think I've heard it's deeper than the R10, which I haven't tried, but I like this one. Yeah, I think that about covers it. It's a Canon. Feels good. Now, you know I'm a fan of looking down the trail shots. This one I like. But it leads me to something that I really like about the R7 compared to the R5. On the R5, when I want to shoot HDR and do a 3-shot or 5-shot bracket, I have to use electronic shutter mode, or electronic first curtain shutter. It won't do it in electronic. So that means shutter noise, and yeah. But the R7 will do it in electronic shutter, so it's faster. You can do a 3-shot burst at electronic frame rates, which are, a lot faster and a lot quieter in case there's any wildlife around that I don't want to spook. I'm hearing some squirrels currently. Not that exciting. But yeah, that's a plus for the R7. I don't know why the R5 can't do it in electronic shutter mode, but the R7 can. And I know you lose a couple of bits of color depth, bit depth when you do that, but so far I haven't really noticed that to be an issue. So yeah, I'll take the quiet and the speed. That really helps if there's anything moving in the frame when you're doing a bracket. So plus for the R7. All right, let's talk autofocus. Now, the new Canon mirrorless cameras, really all the new mirrorless cameras, have really, to me, game-changing autofocus systems. The fact that it can automatically detect in real time and track subjects, even lock on the eye of an animal or a person and track it all the way across the frame, that's just amazing. So the R7's really no different in that respect. But I have found it's not as good as the R5 in my mind. Tends to lose autofocus or tracking a little more than I was used to with the 5. Pausing for passing traffic there. Where was I? So yeah, it tends to lose or jump around a bit more in autofocus. It finds subjects pretty well, but yeah, it seems to not be as sticky. Maybe it's just that I haven't found the right settings, so I'm going to play around with that a bit. I just recently turned on preview autofocus, which basically tries to always be finding a subject to focus on, even if you're not actively pushing either the shutter button or back button autofocus, which is how I've got it set up. So I'll see if that helps at all. I feel like it's not helping me much today. Either that or I'm just off my game today. Having trouble really finding and locking on little birds, but maybe it's just me. I could be cold. So yeah, autofocus, very good, excellent, but maybe not quite as good as the higher end full frame cameras. That's where I'll leave that for now. bird action out here, but it's a nice view. But I don't know if you can see, there's a little leaf, maple leaf, that just fell. I saw it fall, floating along there. I've been looking for a target to kind of show you the benefit of the crop factor. So I'm going to take a couple shots of it framed at what I would see on the R5 at 500 millimeters, which on this camera will be about 310 millimeters, and then racked all the way out, just to kind of show you the difference in filling the frame with a subject. As I've said before, I think I edit everything that I show on these videos, but I won't crop these just to really preserve the field of view that you're getting. Yeah, see what that looks like. Okay, so next let's talk IBIS, in-body image stabilization, which is an excellent feature of all the Canon mirrorless cameras, pretty much all. Yeah, works very well on the R7. The only thing that I've noticed on both my R5 and R7 is sometimes if I'm shooting while the camera's in motion, and obviously the lens and the sensor are both working together to try to stabilize everything, if the sensor twists, it maintains sharpness in the center of the image, but you get some kind of jelly weird effects around the edges. Hasn't happened a lot. I've only noticed it a couple times really, but something to keep in mind. But otherwise, works great. I mean, I've been taking handheld shots with both of these cameras all the way to a second, even a second and a half sometimes. And I don't think I'm particularly steady holding the camera. Fairly steady. I give myself credit for that. But yeah, no way I'd be getting sharp shots without the lens and sensor working together to stabilize things. So thumbs up on that. That's definitely a good system. And that's important with the crop factor, as I hopefully just showed, because I'm shooting today mostly with the 100 to 500 millimeter L lens, which is beautiful. But yeah, at 500 millimeters on the R7, it's an 800 millimeter equivalent, which is tough to handhold. I didn't bring the 800 millimeter lens, which on this thing is a 1280 millimeter equivalent beast. And that's really tough to handhold, even stabilized. So definitely need the stabilizer with that stuff to shoot at anything resembling a usable shutter speed. So good stuff. I did mention also macro is one of the things. Bird's yelling at me. But anyway, I mentioned macro is the other thing that I like the crop sensor for, as it gets you able to fill more of the frame with your subject. Now we are right now at the tail end of fall, barreling into winter, so there's not a lot of what I would call typical macro subjects, flowers and insects, that sort of thing. But I'm seeing a couple things around here that I can shoot, some leaves and a little fall winter flower over here. So we'll see what we can do with that and give you an idea of what kind of magnification you can get with the R7 and the 100 millimeter RF macro lens, which I have along with me. All right, see what we can do with that. Oh yeah, one thing I wanted to note too, I mentioned the 800 millimeter RF lens. Can I get the sun in a good place? There we go. Yeah, it works well with the R7, tough to handhold, but it does let you use more of the frame for focus and tracking, which on the R5, the focus area with the 800 millimeter is really just a big square in the middle of the frame, maybe 50-60% of the total frame area, whereas on the R7, since it's a crop sensor, it covers more of the whole frame, so that's a good thing. Yeah. I'm getting hungry. It's past my lunchtime. Been here for a couple hours, but really not getting all I had hoped to be getting, which is how it goes sometimes. It's still nice to be out. That's the important thing. So let's see, what haven't I talked about? I talked about image quality, autofocus, stabilization, ergonomics, and controls. One thing I would note, R7 adds a couple of interesting little bells and whistles. One thing that's neat is the focal length display in the viewfinder. So it'll tell you what your lens is set to focal length wise, if it's a zoom or not. And that's kind of neat. I wish they would add that to the R5 and the other bodies. I think that wouldn't be too difficult. What else? 800mm we talked about. That might be about it for the R7. I mean, final thoughts on that, I guess. It's a really good camera. Whether you're already in the RF system or not, if you want a crop body, I would go with the R7. The R10, a little cheaper, obviously, and maybe not as sealed, quite as good, but I mean, it depends on your budget, obviously. But if I were picking between the two, I think I would go with the R7, which I did. So far, so good. All right, so I'm rounding the curve. I think I'm coming into the home, well, not the home stretch, but the backside of this hike, which I'm looking forward to. Go get me some lunch. Hopefully we'll see some good stuff on the way, though. Stay tuned. It's a good time for some final thoughts. So, my philosophy on gear is that good gear makes it easier. So, you can take fantastic images with any camera these days, from a cell phone, if it's a good cell phone, up to any digital camera. And I think that's what people mean when they say it's not the gear, it's the photographer. Sure, the more you know, the better shots you're gonna make. But what good gear does, and by good I usually mean expensive, yes, is it gets out of your way when it comes to creating fantastic images. So, like with the lens, if you invest in a faster aperture, the camera and lens won't get in your way when you're shooting in lower light, trying to get a faster shutter speed. If you invest in a lens with ultrasonic autofocus motors, it's a lot snappier, a lot faster to obtain focus and lock it in, and that gets out of your way when you're shooting. So that's what good gear does. So the question is, does the R7 help you or hinder you? And I think it helps you. If you're coming from, especially if you're coming from a mirrored DSLR, the benefits of the mirrorless system are many. And in my case, if I was already in the RF system, but I wanted something with a little more reach, it's good for that too. The autofocus system, I think, can be a little better. Hopefully it will, with firmware updates maybe, or finding the right settings. But yeah, it's better than anything I had before, certainly, before I went mirrorless. So yeah, and the RF glass is fantastic. I haven't really talked about Canon's whole decision to block third-party lens makers, and I'm hoping that's a temporary thing. I kind of get that they maybe want to milk the new system while they can and get people locked into the Canon stuff before they open it up, but for people on a budget, it's definitely a hurtful decision. I'm happy with all the Canon glass and stuff that I've got, but would I have bought it all if I had third-party options? I don't know. So I'm only a Canon consumer, so I don't have insight into what they're thinking, what their choices they're making. It's all about money. It's always about money. And I don't want to ramble too much about that, so yeah, Canon stuff is good. It'd be nice if there were good third-party options as well, and hopefully there will be someday. So that's my 2 cents on that. All right, I'm continuing. I actually had to turn around. Trail was closed. The loop is closed for construction at a certain point. I was hoping I could skirt around it somehow, but no such luck. It's just a dead end. So if you're coming to Dutch Point at the end of 2022 or early 23, watch the signs. Don't go too far, or you'll have to turn all the way around. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, till next time, I'll wrap it up here so I can just walk the rest of the way. Take care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be excellent to each other. Get out and wander.